o'clock. Please join me for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did forget to ask everyone to please either silence or turn off their cell phones. And Denise, inclusions or deletions?
We have one addition, consideration of the ATV request. The North Lake Committee has provided a recommendation.
Great. And our first item on the agenda is public comment, so no public comment. We'll go to our addition because our first and only item that's on our regular session is at 10:10. That's our 2016 fire season review. So Commissioner Winters, you want to chat a little bit about this?
Well, so we had the request come from the ATV group to amend our ordinance to allow ATV travel on Old Lake Road, which is approximately 2+ miles, maybe 3 miles, straight stretch, so that ATV people can get to the facilities, get to the gas station and so on. And then the other part was on, there's a little confusion, but it's technically the Frederick's Butte Road. I call it the Sink/Milliken Road, but that request came in. Very good recommendation was for us to send it up to the North Lake committee that we put together for a recommendation to come back to us whether to open these roads or not. It's been quite some time. They've had a few different meetings, had a hard time getting everybody together. Ron Wilson is the one that chairs that committee up there. As you read through this, you can see where the way Bryant and others, John Lane, had had correspondence. There's been things in the paper up there. And then the very last one, you can see where the chamber board from up there is in support of this. So I think we need to move forward on it today because of the ATV group needs to be able to put their maps together, and the grant is already in process that will pay for those maps, and we want the maps to be as accurate as they can. So Denise, did you get any more correspondence back from Ron?
I haven't received anything else.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to amend our ATV ordinance number, is it 101? What was the ordinance number? Denise, you got me covered on that.
Oh, I want to say it was 108, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm looking. Local ordinance number 104, I'd like to amend it to include the two requests, Old Lake Road and Frederick's Butte Road to be opened as described by the request.
And I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded to approve the amendment to our ATV ordinance number 104 on the two roads that have been described up in the Christmas Valley area. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
So Denise, can you make sure, and we'll have legal counsel on the phone later, what it takes to
Oh,
put that
work with
amendment
them.
onto our ordinance?
I'll work with them on it.
If there's any notification we have to do required or not.
Okay.
So we can do one of two things. We can go to department updates. I don't know, Denise, if you have any updates for today.
I went to a really good ODOT training last week in Bend on our upcoming grant application process for our transit funding. That was really beneficial. Been working on some fleet stuff. Just normal business, I guess.
Okay. Liaison updates for the next couple of minutes. I might, Commissioner, if you don't mind, I might just mention, I'd mentioned yesterday I'd got a request. I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I wasn't going to be attending our next WIFLIT meeting in BC. at the end of November. It's the transition meeting with all of the powers to be to try and make a smooth transition. This is the Wildland Fire Leadership Council I've been a part of for 6.5 years, a national committee that's appointed the two secretaries of Interior and Ag appoint or commission the group. The appointments come through there, but they're by the individual groups that are represented, and counties are represented, and our group is the National Association of Counties. So anyway, I received a call this week when I had told our executive director I probably wasn't going to be able to be there, and one of our co-chairs had called me and asked if I could reconsider. It's a pretty important meeting on transition to ensure that we have all the bases covered, because there'll be a lot of the officials in the different agencies in particular that will probably be moving on after the new administration comes in. So I'll be attending that. Come the end of November, I've got calls in and some appointments already scheduled to be on the Hill the day after. I'll be flying in the night before the meeting, and the day following I'll be visiting with our congressional folks and others, trying to make it a little bit more worthwhile, because it's a long ways back there, and you gotta get a few things done, and then I'll be flying back to Portland. So that's something that's coming up here at the end of the month.
I don't have a whole lot to report on, other than we do have SCOED and SCOAC meetings here on Friday. You won't be here to be able to attend. I believe you're going to be on on that, so I will be here. Tomorrow I do have a conference call as a cooperating agency on the Sagebrush Focal Area Group. They will be giving an update on what alternatives they may consider on the mining side of the withdrawal. Talked with Judge Grasky out of Harney County this morning for a while. He's not going to make the phone call tomorrow, but him and I both have been strategizing on a couple of things, but this is basically, I'll listen to what they're considering for the alternatives on the yelling lands here in Lake County, well, in Oregon and other states too. Other than that, I really don't. I just have business as usual. As you know, I'm working with our local shippers and our local railroad operator, as there's been some disruption over time, so I'm continuing to work on that.
And I understand that. I know how, number one, how important that is, Commissioner, and how involved that is, and really appreciate all your tremendous time and effort on that. Hopefully we will have a good outcome. So.
Well, in the way I work, I pull a team of people together, and so I brought Dave as the railroad department budget person, and Denise on, working on getting service the best we can here.
Yep.
And boy, that's
I think we're right at 10:10. So, Mr. Bob Crumright.
Okay. Do you want to hand these to him, or do you
Sure.
want me to?
Whatever you want to do.
Just one for each one.
Okay. Here's one from Clarence.
I don't know.
Come on. If you have extras, the president would like.
Well, we'll go over that a little bit. So, we'll start off with one thing here, and that is, I think, an encouraging thing to be entrusted to give a fire season update for our interagency partners with one voice is kind of a reflection of how our service first nature and mission over agency is developing. It constantly gets better after years. So then I have no problem speaking to that voice for all our partners, none at all. The product you have right there is an internal tool that our dispatch center puts out for some of our own awareness, and I provide that to you because there's parts we'll highlight in there when I talk to you about how the season went. The rest of it you can kind of digest as you want to look at for whatever benefit you might get. It's not necessarily a public document. And it is not complete. It is in a draft format. There's things that we will compile under our own end of the season report, like statistics on retardant and aircraft use and some other tools that become part of this. But it truly has at least some good things for us to speak to today on number of starts by agency, human versus lightning, and how where those significant fires were for the year.
So Bob, since we have our meetings recorded and video and everything, just a quick question in case anybody's listening specifically
Sure.
about this. This is drafted.
It's drafted.
You mentioned that it's not a public document yet, but will this end up on the webpage eventually?
Yeah, this is website will have it, and so we don't want to lead anybody astray
Right.
while it's in draft. But the tool, and you give them kudos for putting it together, is why it's being used today.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay. So, speaking for the 5 agencies represented in South Central Oregon, we have the Park Service, the Forest Service, Fremont Wynema, the Lakeview District BLM, Klamath Lake Unit ODF, and Sheldon Park National Wildlife Refuge Complex. This has statistics for all of those entities within this report. So we had an early start. As you recall, the spring was fairly dry, and we had lightning in early June. And because we had conditions that were fairly dry, we saw significant fire behavior even in those early June fires. As a matter of fact, the largest one that the Fremont Wynema National Forest had was on June 5th for the entire year. So that spoke to how dry things were after even having some snowpack. It's because they dried out quickly. Then we later, shortly thereafter, once we had full forces with resources and staffing, got a shot of moisture towards the end of June and July, and that kind of set us back into a couple more weeks of getting into a normal seasonality.
Are you, want to take questions as we go along?
Sure, anytime.
That's, you know, like you, I've lived here all my life. June 5th is very early. The drought conditions and all that. Are you seeing, or could you, have you considered that maybe some of that fire behavior is because of the condition of the forest and the densities of the forest? Does that impact it at all?
It would have an impact of receptiveness and the intensity in which something would burn, but I think the seasonality has more to do with the climate. The length of the season, starting earlier, ending later, probably has more to do with any kind of climate irregularities we would have. But the intensity and receptiveness, now that could be due to whatever fuel matters out there on private, federal lands anywhere, I think would constitute that.
Well, I think Bob, the reason I ask it is that's one thing that we work on and talk about all the time is the density of the forest and the fire behavior that can happen because of in certain areas, overstocking and
It's
overgrazing.
definitely a complex issue.
Well, and not to get out there in left field for this discussion, but, you know, I was going to give an update during the liaisons, and I won't go into that in depth, but there are people out there that believe that the carbon that's stored in the trees, when they're thinned, and they lay on the ground, and then the logging that does take place on merchantable timber, and the limbs and the tops that remain, just stay there forever, and that carbon stays stored. And you folks, when you have the resources, I think typically either hand pile that material, machine pile that material, prescribe burn that material, or it goes up in a wildfire and contributes to what you were, I think, talking about relative to the climate, because all that carbon is eventually released into the atmosphere.
One time or another, it will get released.
Yes.
And we will have we have a fuels portion in this a little bit too, that says how much treatment there was.
If I take this, I would just say I'll answer that later, rather
You know
than.
what, being just a topic on the agenda, I think we have the luxury to go whatever we do, so I'm good with
Thank you,
that.
Bob.
You bet. So, one thing to highlight about the third paragraph down on that third page is that the number of total wildfire incidents we had was about 50% of our normal. We typically get over 300 wildfire incidents in a season, and this year the graph that's actually on page 4, you can see the total amount of wildfire incidents was only 146. Another irregularity is that we typically do get about 98 human-caused fires within our dispatch coverage area in a year. So the difference is lightning-caused fires. We're down approximately 150 lightning-caused fires for nice round numbers from what our average is. That is very atypical. That is not normal. This unit, the unit in which Lake County Emergency Fire Center covers, has more lightning and lightning-caused fires than any other unit in Oregon and Washington.
So how large is that unit?
That's roughly 10 million acres, just less than 10 million acres, including all partners, all lands.
So you guys did a great job of,
Putting up the lightning shield?
putting
Yeah.
that, preventing lightning fires.
Yeah.
That's very good.
So in case two, it doesn't illustrate and correlate directly to the burning conditions. See, lightning can occur when it's wet, when it's dry. The burning conditions we actually had this year were very normal. Matter of fact, there was a time period in late August and September that we hit historical highs for indices. And that's represented in the amount of acres that you see burned on human-caused fires. 5 of the 6 different units captured within here, subunit being Klamath Unit Odiep and Lake Unit Odiep, 5 of those 7 units, the largest fire they had this year was caused by human-caused fires. A few of the main case studies right there you look at, the one on the Forest Service, which was in early June, the draw fire, which was caused by lightning, 497 acres. That footprint was generated because that's the size the fire wanted to be. I mean, it wanted to burn, even in June. Bybee Creek, which is the largest for the Park Service, that one got over 1,000 acres, but it was human-caused fire. Withers Fire, which many folks within Lake County are very familiar with because it was right outside of Paisley, with a lot of people, highly visible. That too was a human-caused fire, and that's the largest fire that the BLM had this year.
So, just so we sort of get a picture here, human-caused fires, how many of them were arson, how many of them was accidental? Well, not the total numbers, but your bigger ones, were they human-caused by arson or accidental? Because we know the local one was arson, that we assume it was.
What we've been told by the investigators that they will deem that arson. Most of the human-caused fires, even the large one in Bybee Creek on the Crater Lake that I spoke to earlier, that's accidental. Arson, you know, the term of arson means intentional, and with negligence that they actually wanted that to occur. So we don't have a lot of those.
Okay.
The thing I'd like to praise the folks that we have within our publics and our users and our private landowners, we typically get 90 or so human-caused fires, but that's not a high rate for how many acres we have here. We generally have a populace that does an outstanding job of knowing and understanding what fire danger is and that this is a fire-borne environment that we live in. And so a lot of the words and releases and thresholds we use to try to ensure that that danger is explained, and so people can become aware and not put themselves or others at risk or risk burning some of those lands that we all can enjoy, they honor that. So we have a good relationship there. Even with burning conditions as bad as they were this year, as far as ability to rapidly spread, to ignite easily, we didn't see more human-caused fires, but we did see that they did like to burn.
So Bob, historically, it's always a little bit of a toss-up on fire numbers when it comes to human caused as to what you report and what you might not report. Have you pretty well solidified that of these 98 fires, are they typically outside of campgrounds, in the forest?
Most of them you will see, the highest amount are actually on Klamath Unit Odiep. And there's a lot of population and mixed protection in which Klamath Unit ODF, as well as municipal fire departments, rural fire departments, they share that response. It could be anything from burn barrels to debris piles to, so most of them are around population centers on the human cost. And when you get to the public lands, most of those would be near recreation areas.
Yeah, it's just so that anybody that's
Yep.
listening to this doesn't think you're finding non-intentional human-caused fires right out in the middle of the forest
Yeah.
itself. It's
That's more
usually
rare.
associated with
More
something.
rare.
to
And they do a great job. I mean, we,
Yeah.
the publics here are very informed on the dangers associated with activities that could create a fire, even accidental. And so that's one thing that helps us. Because the hardest thing for us to prepare for and predict is human-caused fire.
Yep.
When it comes to natural ignitions and lightning, all partners within the agency have regular conversations every week and even throughout the week about the potential that could occur. And if we see a pattern where it looks like it could occur, where we could get a number of lightning strikes, we combine a preparedness strategy, get additional resources, assets in here to try to ensure that we can stay ahead of that.
And you guys do a great job on it.
Thank you.
You hear that from us every year, but we appreciate that. What you mentioned about like Klamath County, what we're seeing in Lake County starting to go there too, as far as from commissioner's view is as land use and people start moving further and further out and on their little 10 acres here and there, that's whenever you start to see the human-caused fires from the burning barrel or from the brush pile or even the wood stove sometimes, because we're starting to have, I don't like using the word, but urban sprawl in a sense. And right here in Lake County, one place that I've always heard about is the Drews area naturally. You know, there's a lot more homes going in up there where there's potential burning and everything, but we're seeing that more and more. Klamath County, I know a segment of them, a part of them, there's quite a few homes in place that you know, you have the multiple coverage like you say, but it's not always they get there as fast as we need them. I think we're gonna see more and more of that.
There are programs out there now that, Firewise and some other things to inform some of those folks that may be moving into the urban interface, that allow them to be more informed too. So I'm not sure that statistically we're seeing more human-caused fires, even with more development that slowly grows into those interface areas.
And I probably should use potential for more here.
There certainly is potential,
Yeah.
correct. So, short message there is we had about the average number, in summary of just that part, we had the average number of human-caused fires we would have. We are down about 150 natural starts due to lightning. And as a result of that, we were also able to provide some of our staff resources to other areas that were being impacted this year and provide some support outside of the South Central Oregon area for fires, which is, in my opinion, it's better to be an exporter than an importer with resources. That means at home, you're not facing some of those challenges. And Mother Nature just didn't line up storms that had enough moisture for lightning activity during the months of July and early August when we typically get. In prescribed fire, move into that, into some treatments there. Let's see, it's on page 12 there, you can see that the total acres treated by prescribed fire. This is both underburning, pile burning, debris burning, by unit and agency there. Then what's not captured is that could be done by a private landowner. ODF doesn't necessarily capture that, so even like large timber companies, that what they do on their lands isn't captured within this. But the BLM for their fiscal year of 16, which runs from September to September, basically October 1 through the end of September of 16, accomplished 6,316 acres. A good proportion of that was in Lake County. There's a lot of sage grouse improvement projects east of Lakeview, which a large amount of those acres were done. juniper reduction, piles burning for that habitat improvement. And then also areas around Silver Lake and north of Christmas Valley by Green Mountain, or some other project areas where a lot of those activities occurred. Fish and Wildlife Service got quite a bit accomplished this year too, as a result of projects in the pipeline that they had for sage-grouse habitat improvement too, with over 1,400 acres burned. The Fremont Wayne National Forest got 9,500 plus acres of treatment with prescribed fire. And the Park Service did 94 acres of debris pile burn. So we started out with the spring with a fairly decent underburn opportunity and weather. The snow melted fairly rapidly. Then we had a period early enough with some drying conditions that was favorable for windows to exist where you would be able to accomplish specific fire objectives on that landscape. So we had some underburning opportunities then, and then dried out a little bit, and we closed that off. This fall again, we had about a week plus, almost 2 weeks in which we got some moisture, and it alleviated some of the wildfire threat, as well as hit windows of opportunity where the right conditions existed to meet that prescription for that specific objective where we could do some underburning. And we accomplished some there, and then we got a lot of moisture. As you know, this fall, once the moisture set in and that pattern set in, we got quite a bit of moisture. And now, for the most part, we see a lot of activity in debris piles, mechanical piles, hand piles, cleanups of the things you're talking about there, Dan, or you spoke of earlier. So the BLM, the Forest Service, as well as the rest of the interagency partners are actively going out and trying to clean up those debris piles that are up.
So back to the prescribed burning, Bob, any idea what the percentage of those burned acres were maintenance acres versus either first
First or second entry,
Yeah.
that's a mix. With the forest, there's a large amount of those acres were maintenance acres. Second entry, there's some areas in which a unit itself has the mix of all three. Dan, first entry for some portions of it, and then also some maintenance, depending on what the analysis area from NEPA, that watershed or that boundary incorporated.
So what are the biggest drawbacks to, I mean, you could tell me the figures, you talked about the total land base, and I recognize that there's differences within that 10 million acres that SCAFUN covers. But of the ones that typically, those acres that would typically be treated using prescribed fire as one of the main tools, what would be the amount of acreage you would need to do on an annual basis to have the fire resiliency you're shooting for, and what are the drawbacks to that being able to be accomplished? Because this acreage, while within the
What
resources
are the
you
barriers to allow that to be accomplished? Is that what you
have,
heard?
yeah,
So we'd have to be burning a lot of acres a year. And it depends on the maintenance schedule you would like to be able to reach and touch and treat all of those acres. Some of them don't need to be touched nearly as often as others to maintain ecosystem health, with fire being a tool. Granted, there's some of them that could be touched every 10 years or less. Others don't need to be touched maybe for 50 plus years based on that regime that they're in. So that's a complex issue, but the statement on treatment and using fire as a tool for ecosystem and forest health, well, not just forest, but any ecosystem health, it was something that was born here long before us as the tool, the main disturbant agent that allowed this ecosystem, these lands, shape and look the way they do for us. The barriers. Us as an implementation workforce to get that done, there are policies in place that have to get done and processes that have been established. NEPA is one, and being able to analyze and have that done is something that has to be done. There's a process for that to occur and a process for public comment and change. Funding is another one. In order to have enough funding to have the personnel and resources available to go out and even if you have an area in which all the planning has occurred, you still need to have the assets or resources, and in this case, the resources being money to get that done. Smoke management is another issue that is a barrier to just how much we can do and when. We could have a project that is a good one, even near a community or something like that, good being that it is good to go, that you have the right conditions, the right window to accomplish the specific prescribed fire objectives that you want to on that landscape, and you can be limited because of the amount of emissions that might be going into a sensitive area through DEQ on just, you know, you can only do this many acres, or you can only do that many acres. So that also cuts the window of opportunity down for some of those treatments, not something we control. All those things are not necessarily things that we completely control. So we do very good navigating through those to the best we can. I say that because we have a history on this forest, if you're talking about forest health, of accomplishing more prescribed fire acres every year for the last several years than any other forest in the entire region. We do 80,000, this year we did 80,000, I believe, total treatment acres in combination of all, could be mechanical, could be thinning, could be harvest. Those are all treatments, they're all tools for managing forested lands. Prescribed fire is one of them as well. That's more than any other forest. And it's still a challenge. Is it still enough? I don't know. We just
Yeah,
do the best we can with what we're given. Yeah.
And it's kind of an unfair question for you today with the fuels treatment side of things, but I just wanted you to have the opportunity to essentially say, if all these barriers were removed, this is, when we talk in our offices, this is what we would target on an annual basis to treat, to stay relevant to the health of the forest, replicate disturbance, et cetera. So we don't need to get bogged down in that anymore, but I know you
We are
will.
part of the executive side of the government. And
Yeah.
whatever tools are put into that toolbox are what we have to play with.
Exactly.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate that we're the highest amount of thinning, prescribed burning, and everything, 80,000 acres, and that's on the Fremont range limit.
That's correct.
And so if you, simple thing for me, you take the total number of acres, and it doesn't take long to figure out how many years it would take to get across that, and it's several years. It's great that we're the top, but we need to get to much more than 80,000 acres per year to build.
And we're trying to find creative ways to do it.
I know that. Excuse me, I know that, Bob. Thank you for being the number one, but we need to be there to
Well,
get across the.
that's where we advocate for, because we can do that where, you
Yeah.
know, there's no secrets here, I mean,
Yeah.
that,
We put a lot of pressure on Dan Shamp.
well, it's just, you know, these are opportunities to clearly describe it, because you never know who's gonna pick this up. You know.
Sure.
And it's not lost on most folks, but you do everything you can do within the bounds of what you're all allowed to do. And
Yeah.
I would like to see, though, a number, not today, but I'd like to see a number out there publicly, whether it's Jimmy reporting on it through the Examiner or whatever. This is what the agencies would do if there weren't any encumbrances, whether it's financial or NEPA or air quality or any of those things. This is what they do because they know this is what it's gonna take to have that resiliency and that historic disturbance met. Because quite frequently, you know, there's a lot of conversations about what's not done, and people don't realize, you guys are doing everything you can do within the bounds of what you can do.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. So, some of the other things within this is just for your pleasure, if you want us.
Yeah.
It's more internal, but as far as the fire season itself, as far as suppression activities, and then, the prescribed fire and treatment activities, for our unit, I think I've covered that. And so if there was any more information or questions you'd have,
Just a different comment, page 10, the NOAA assessment. I sure hope that they're right, because we're in sort of the light brown area that says drought removal likely. I sure wished I had that crystal ball that they have. because-
Well, as a part-time member of the governor's
That's
task
nothing to
force.
do with you, Bob, that's their
Yeah.
assessment.
So Commissioner, I think, you know, if I get an assignment, I try and fulfill it. And I was appointed to the governor's task force on drought. And we're doing our best to make sure, by direction to the legislature, that we get out of drought here, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can put that shield up.
Well, you know, the one problem with that, just kind of talking about it really briefly, is that, you know, my role specifically on that was lessened by my own choice, simply because the legislature, in a somewhat knee-jerk reaction, did short-term possible solutions for drought as opposed to long-term vision, whether it's storage or where the water originates from in the uplands and what we can do to increase that available water downstream, et cetera. So that report, just for information, is gonna be coming out. It came out yesterday and to the legislative body, and that'll be probably online here shortly, so it'll probably be of interest to you folks. And
Sure.
this second and last comment I'll make, Bob, you briefly touched on the Withers fire.
I was gonna close with something there. So
Well,
please do.
I just really appreciate the fact that the largest city in Lake County was well protected through the actions of the group, all involved in that, so.
Well, I need to make a comment on that because I didn't engage on that much at all because it was in your backyard literally and you were the commissioner that was working with everybody. I heard some of the most positive response of all the agencies in the cooperation and the getting the information out there and working together. I heard nothing but positive, Bob. And I'm speaking for Forest, BLM, state, and local agencies, everything. I heard very, very positive. So
Good.
job well done.
Thank you. Thank you. The thing that I would have wanted to close with in speaking to the Withers, it was an unfortunate circumstance that created a great opportunity to show what we strive to do. Mission over agency, get the job done, protect what people value. That one was in front of everyone's eyes where they could see that, but there are incidents out there that nobody sees where the same exact efforts are strived and accomplished.
Oh, yes.
And it doesn't happen overnight. It's been a series of years and years and years of cooperating trust and availability that gets us there. And that is a leveraging tool. That is something that is strong within that 10 million acres we speak of. So when a circumstance doesn't go favorably, Mother Nature wins, and the fire does something negative that we don't want to see have happen, nor do our publics. It's not through a lack of trying or organizing to maximize effectiveness.
Well, Bob, I think where the biggest gains over, we'll say, the last 4 years have been specific to that fire, and as you alluded to, there's other fires that it happens. The interagency working relationships and communication, you know, that's, as you said, it's worked on every year to strengthen it. That's why you're here today representing all the entities. But what was way more visible was the communication with the affected parties, or potentially affected parties, that made all those folks feel really good. They just did.
Good.
And so, you know, that was probably, in the last 4 years, that was probably the biggest gain I think you all have had. And it played out. So, yeah.
Thank you.
We're gonna hold you to that drought likely being lifted.
Hey, that's not
Yeah.
even our tool. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
You bet.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, we have concluded all of the regular agenda items, I believe, and I'd like to propose about a 5 to 10 minute break before we go into executive session. So
So I got one thing I think is quick before we take a
Okay.
quick break is, and not liaison, it's Board of Commissioners. And I just wanted to mention a little bit about nuisance complaints in that we've been working on trying to get a position filled. but we've been asked several times to do some educational side of that. And I think that today we ought to consider some kind of education advertisement that the county is working on this position, and we'll see some, hopefully, enforcement and nuisance enforcement within the next year or something. So get it out to our local paper, get it out to community breeds, and get it out to Desert Whisper. We've been asked several times about that, and we say, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But we haven't done it, so I'm sort of asking for a nod for maybe to have our administrative assistant put together, this is what the commissioners are working on, this is where we're going.
I concur.
Okay,
Yep.
I just think that's important, just it's slipping through the cracks.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, I'm ready.
So we'll take a 10-minute break here. We'll come back in at about 8 minutes to 11.